Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lesson 6, Foundations of Writing. So let's just jump right in. So basically, here is our writing pyramid. So we have written expression at the top, which of course is what we want our students to be able to do, is actually write down their ideas. The main ones for developing writing expression are oral language, and then all of the writing processes and strategies, which include conventions, text structures, phonics, all these things. And over here, oral language is knowledge building, vocab, and phonemic awareness. So let's have a look at these two segments. Okay, so basically oral language and stories. So I love these quotes. Those who tell the stories rule the world. This is attributed to Hopi Indians. And Margaret Atwood says, "You're never going to kill storytelling because it's built in the human plan. We come with it." Okay, so oral language is crucial in literacy development, as it's the first way that we engage with language, and we continue to engage with language through oral communication our entire lives. And we use oral language to tell stories on a daily basis. So when you get together with your friends, you call them, you FaceTime them, you say, "Hey, guess what happened to me today?" That's you telling your story. Okay, so we are storied people. So it goes all the way, telling stories goes all the way from sort of casual, "Hey, this is what I did on the weekend," to it being a very honored position in society. So oral storytelling in Indigenous culture has the essence that a storyteller is a prominent role in traditional lives it's a prominent role. It's a very honored role. It's a very sacred role. So stories are, in and of themselves, are sacred, and they have a real purpose. And so the people who tell the stories are then honored and revered in most Indigenous cultures. Okay, so the stories basically, I was going to say, for some of you, I read Stolen Words to you in 371. If you don't know this book, it's well worth it. It's in the library. Well worth you having a look. It's very sad because the grandfather has his language and his stories stolen from him because he went to residential school, and his little granddaughter finds a book of his original, his first language, and gives him back his words and his stories, which are so important to the Indigenous cultures, and really to all of our cultures. If we have our stories taken away, we lose part of our connection. Okay, so basically the stories, they externalize human plights. So why are we going through this particular thing or this particular hardship? And the stories in Indigenous cultures were there to teach the young, so moral values and social conduct. So it was a way to pass along culture, values, morals. And ultimately, you might go, well, how can oral language, why are we talking about oral language if we're talking about writing traditions? So basically, in Indigenous cultures, the oral tradition is more important than written accounts. So I'm just going to read this. Oral telling of stories was equal to a story that is written down. In modern culture, we place a higher value on stories that are written down, as they appear to be more permanent and true, but not so in Indigenous culture. There's of course, variations between Indigenous cultures, but they really see the oral storytelling and oral stories as equal to written, whereas in more Western culture, we see the written tradition as having more value. Okay, so because we tell stories in an oral fashion, it's important that we look at it as a foundation for writing our stories, because when we actually tell our stories, then we actually have something to write about. And we're going to get into that. Okay, so here we go. Oral language and writing what's happening there? So basically, oral language and storytelling are at the root of our writing. We need to tap into our students' stories as the root of their writing. So we all have stories as teachers and as students. We all have stories. And you might go, no, my life isn't that exciting. I don't have any stories. We all have stories. Okay. So in your writing, like your assignment for writing, I'm trying to lead you to write about topics that are close to your heart, that might make you cry, that might make you laugh, that might make you excited, that might make you ponder, right? But I'm letting you do your writing on something that you are excited about. I'm trying not to lead you to, okay, write an ode about coffee when you actually don't drink coffee, because you won't have a story. But if you are a coffee lover, you probably have all sorts of stories. You have a favorite mug, you have a favorite brand. And so it's close to who you are and to your stories. Okay. So when we connect to the story, the writing process becomes way easier. Okay, so that's why I'm trying to get you to think about how can we tap into our students' stories, because our students all have their own stories, right? So how we want to get away also from the kind of the blank page issues, right? What do I write about? We've all heard kids, well, I don't know what to write, or you have done it, right? As students, you've gone the blank page paralyzes us. And what we want to get away from is also this paralysis when kids start to write, is that I don't know how to spell this word. And what we want to do is we want to tap into getting kids to think about their stories first, and then that we're going to write them down. So that's why the oral language, being able to tell the story first and then write it down, is super important. Okay, so let's go. This is going to be a little bit of a project for you. I've slotted time into our lecture time for you to actually do this. So you are going to tell one of your stories, and you're going to base it on the Moth template. So I want you to go to, this is the NYC subway story by Jeff Zimmerman, and I want you to go and listen to Jeff. So the Jeff is here, and I want you to listen. It's about a 5.5-minute story. It's about him being on the New York subway, in an event on the New York subway. I want you to think about what story you have that you can tell in Collaborate on Monday, that you can share a 2-minute story from your life with a group of 4, possibly 6. I'll see if I can figure that out. Okay, look up on lesson 6 Moth tips on Blackboard lesson on our Blackboard lesson 6. I want you to organize your little talk. Don't ramble. Don't just ramble about something, like organize it. But I don't want you to have any notes. This is part of the oral language tradition, is we don't read it. What we do is we feel it and we have it in here, right? So don't write it down. Don't be reading it. And it's going to be 2 minutes. So pick a really specific event or story from your life. Even if you'd go, it's not very exciting. It's your story. It's your story. And I want you to be ready to share your 2-minute story. Pick a very specific event. It's probably easier. Humor is fine. It can be serious. It can be a reflection, anything like that. So spend some time. You can go to the Moth homepage and have a look around, and you can go to the Moth education program, because you might go, this is super cool, and I want to actually do this with my kids. And you can actually organize a Moth competition. And this will really help those kids who have great stories and great imagination, but they have a hard time actually writing it down. And this will give them that confidence to find their stories and then ultimately to write them down. Okay, so again, I'm just going to reiterate this here. Sorry, I should have said go and do that. Go and do that, start to think about that, and then continue. Or if you want to go through the whole lecture and then do that at the end, you can. But don't forget, because I want you to do that and Collaborate on Monday. Okay, so Oral language and writing. So we all have stories. Our students all have stories. So then this leads into the next part. So how do we get students to write these stories down? Okay, we want to encourage our students to write about topics, ideas, people that they're interested in. Okay, so what do we have to know? So that's sort of the first part. And then what do we have to know about writing to be a great writing teacher? So these are the two big questions that we're going to look at in this particular lesson today. All right. So first of all, this seems like maybe a weird place to start, but we want our classrooms to be places of support for writing. And this is from Lily King, who is the author of Writers and Lovers. All problems with writing and performing come from fear. Fear of exposure, fear of weakness, fear of lack of talent, fear of looking like a fool for trying, for even thinking you could write in the first place. It's all fear. If we didn't fear, imagine the creativity in the world. Fear holds us back every step of the way. So in our classrooms, when we focus on all the things that the students are doing incorrectly, and we are making them, worry about your spelling, worry about your grammar. I want you to write about a squirrel, even though you maybe don't have any issue, you don't have any contact with the squirrel. I want you to write about things that I think are important as a teacher, but you may not feel are important. Those are all, when we focus on those things, we don't encourage our students to take risks, to be creative, to find their own voice, and to write something truly authentic. What we get when we don't have this support in place is we get mediocre, lame paragraphs, again, about squirrels. Okay? We've all read those paragraphs. What we want to do is we really want them to be in a place in our classrooms where they will take risks and they will write about things that they are passionate about. Okay? It's not really about making a beautiful piece of art at the beginning, but it's all about actually starting down the road of creating. We'll get to the beautiful piece of art, but we want them to not fear that first step. So again, if there's pleasure in this process in writing, it will actually get better in time. And we want to create that fun and safe place for our kids to write, because especially if they have the idea that I can't write, I'm not a good writer, everybody else is a better writer than me. We want to get them away from that focus on fear and get them to focus on that they actually have stories and that they can actually write them down. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about general ways of teaching writing. So what you want to think about is teach writing the way real writers write. And this was a session I went to by author Laurie Halse Anderson, and she wrote Shout, Speak, Chains, and Winter Girls as just a few of hers. She also wrote the whole vet volunteer series, and she was really amazing in this session. And I loved what she said about how can we teach writing. So here we go. These are some of her suggestions. Act like an editor. We don't want to simply tell our kids what to write, but we want to help them improve on the areas that need improving and praise the author for the areas that are truly fantastic. So that's what she says an editor does. Her editor doesn't force the author to totally change their voice or their way of writing to the way the editor thinks, but helps the author improve the areas that need improving and praise the areas that they're actually doing quite well. She also said, always put a happy face somewhere on the student's writing. That actually might be their motivation to go on. And when I was teaching at the U of C, I actually did this. I put little happy faces on their papers when they made me laugh, or it was a really amazing thought, or they developed a thought really well. And I taught one class all the way from September to April, so I knew them quite well by the end. And I realized that they were not really even looking at the mark. They were looking for happy faces. And I had this big, like 6'4" guy, and I hadn't put any happy faces on his paper. And he's like, he was so sad. He's like, I didn't get any happy faces. And I went, wow, these guys are really focusing on the happy faces, not on all the comments that I wrote or the grade, which was okay, but on the happy faces. So she said, put a happy face somewhere on the kids' writing because that might be their motivator to continue on. She also said, don't push students to your voice or a beige voice. Let the students have their own voice. So you know those art projects that are out in the hallway that are all basically the same? That's a beige voice where the kids just go through the motion. They all do the same, but there's no sort of creativity. There's no individuality in there. What she's saying is don't push the kids to all write from the same point of view with your voice or a beige voice. Let them find their own voice. Also, you want to focus on making the writer better and not the paper better. So you want to give skills to the writer, to the student that they can take into several writing situations. Okay. When you do conferences or when you talk to the student about their writing, they should be saying, you should be able to ask, what do you expect I'm going to say? And they should be able to answer. You might ask, what do you expect I'm going to say? And they'll say, yeah, I used good and fine a lot. And I know that those aren't really great descriptive words. I should use more descriptive words. So ask the kids. They usually know in their writing what they could do better with. Okay, start with a feeling. She says the process needs to start with a feeling, a curiosity, and a little bit of research. But the students, that's where they start. And then they revise all the way. And we're going to talk about revision. Okay, but let them start with that feeling, a little bit of curiosity. Maybe they go, oh, I found this thing that I'm really interested in. I'm going to do a little research, and that's going to be the basis of my writing. Okay. The next point, just write what you want to say. Have the kids write what they want to say. Don't worry about spelling, bad words, grammar. Don't judge. All those things will come later, but just write. She also says, get over the rush to cover so much as a teacher and hover a little bit more on a particular work. She said kids should be spending 1 or 2 weeks on one writing project, sorry, not just 1 class period or 2 class periods, but let them really dive in. So hover instead of rushing through. Let the students, get them to create first and then judge later. Because if they judge right off the top, you know what happens when you judge right off the top. It's really hard to get going and get those stories out. So have them create and then judge. And you are the bridge. Okay, so I'm going to read this. We hold them to examine beauty and ideal, but we as the teachers are the bridge between the students and their texts. They need to see us write and see writing as a process and not a product. Okay, so you as the teacher you want to be writing as much as you can with your students and show your students your writing. And show your students your actual physical writing. Right? I think I showed you the ode. Like that's what the ode looked like, right? There's some scratching out. I went in a different direction, those kind of things. So actually show your students your writing. Okay. These thoughts are from Penny Kittle, and I'll introduce her to you later in the lecture. But in order for your kids to get these stories and get these ideas down, she said have a sketchbook. So have kind of like your journal, like what you are writing in, have them have a physical sketchbook where they can just write down things like, okay, I've got this idea for a story. These are the people, these are the places, these are events. This is the loss, this is what's going on. This is my first draft, those kind of things. What she's saying is the old thinking around writing is the writing is defined as pre-writing, so you brainstorm an idea for a teacher's topic. Then you draft, often using organizer or template. Then you revise with a checklist. Then you edit, you correct errors, and then final drafts graded. So students are work mostly under teacher direction throughout the unit. New thinking is the writing process includes generating ideas through quick writing. So you just write, just get the ideas down. Quick writing to poems. So you might want to just write it in a quick poem, to infographics. Might want to bring in some pictures, to photos, to editorials. These quick writes are revised as regular practice. So have the kids have a journal. You can go to thrift store and buy little journals for the kids, or you can get them to bring their own in. And this is where they just jot down as many ideas. This is never a graded situation. You don't grade their sketchbook, just like I'm not grading your writing projects. I'm grading your reflection on your writing projects. So don't grade this. Okay, so you can also, excuse me, you can also just have the kids draw a stick person, and then what is this stick person thinking? What is this stick person feeling? And this is a good way to, if they're feeling a little bit anxious about, I don't know how to start, say draw a stick person, and then just give that stick person some feelings in there. Okay, so what we're trying to do with this sketchbook is we're trying to eliminate blank page-itis, right? We've all had blank page-itis, where we look at the page and we're like, we have nothing. Okay, so this is from Hamilton. Here's Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he wrote, when he was writing Hamilton, which took like 6 years, I believe, for him to write it, he wrote, I wish writing were really like the way Andy staged it here. So Andy's the director. Me in a mania, which is his frock, at a desk while a group of people stand around cheering in awe. More realistically, it's me pooping around on Twitter until I get an idea. So this is not how the writing process goes. What we want to do is have that sketchbook, get some ideas down, and then when the kid goes to actually start to write on the blank page, they already have their stories basically there. They just need to script them then. Okay. The idea also is revision is crucial. Oh, here, I'll get myself out of the way here. Revision is crucial. And revision, we have to kind of think, is taking something that is good and making it great. Revision is clarification of ideas, not correction. So this is where you want the student to be revising ideas, revising grammatical sentence, like grammar in their sentences, those kind of things. So real readers revise all the time. We often think, there's a book and that the author just wrote the book that way. Authors, when I refer back to this author, she talked about her books did not look anything like their final product. She revised like 7-8 times each book, maybe sometimes even 12 or 13 times in there. Okay, so this is why you want to sort of hover instead of rush, is they want to work on one of their pieces of writing, one of their stories for a long time. Let it sit, let it percolate, and then revise it. So students need to reread their own writing all the time. Oftentimes what happens is they write a paragraph about a squirrel, they hand it in, they never come back to it. What we're saying is now we want these kids to, okay, so this is a child's own, this is not the teacher, this is the child's own revision. These are revisions here. Look how messy it is. And this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's scribbles in his sketchbook for You'll Be Back, for the King's Song. So you can see he's scribbled some things out. So we want to encourage our students to reread their own writing, and we want them to be revising all the time. Okay, so to ensure writers or students become excellent writers is you need to demonstrate, I'm going to move myself back up here. You need to demonstrate that you are a writer. You as the teacher are a writer who writes with the reader in mind. So you're actually thinking about a real audience. Again, that's why I'm sorry to pick on squirrels. I like squirrels. Squirrels are nice. But this is where you want to give your students a real audience. Because if you're just sort of writing, this is a squirrel, they don't really know why they're writing it or who they're writing it to or how they should be writing it, those kind of things. So you need to demonstrate to them in your modeled and guided reading or writing time, is that you write with the reader in mind. You also want to guide students to choose topics they care about and give students time to talk and write about them. Okay. You want to teach strategies to draft, revise, edit, and publish. We're going to go through those. You need to rely primarily on regular conferences with students to assess. Remember, that's that small group. That's that guided writing time. That's sacred time for you to be focusing particularly on what each individual child needs. Okay? And make writing real. Actually publish some of there. Send some into the local newspaper. Organize a poetry slam and actually do it. Send stuff into writing contests. I put on your lesson 6, I put on a New York Times where you can actually, students can send stuff in to the New York Times to potentially be published. Maybe it won't ever be published, but when you actually make it real and you actually make it beyond just write me a paragraph about a squirrel and I'm going to grade it and give it back to you and then we'll never talk about it again. It makes it real. That way they actually have an audience and they actually kind of know their writing can be more focused because they go, oh, I'm writing this for the Medicine Hat News. I'm writing this to perform at a poetry slam in my elementary school, right? So it makes writing so much more focused and real. Okay, and final one of this section is spend less time on stuff of writing. So don't worry so much about spelling, grammar. You'll get it. You'll get it eventually. But let them just write. Let them just get their stories down. And this is, I bolded this, teach writing skills in context, not in isolation. Okay, so in those mini lessons that you're doing, that's where you're going, okay, lots of my kids are wanting to use direct quotes. So now's the time to teach how do you actually punctuate when you have a direct quote, because then they go, oh, they use it right away in their writing. Okay, make writing part of all curriculum. So again, get them to write in science and social and math. Remember those literacy competencies? We need to be looking at literacy across curriculum. Students should become effective and joyful writers and communicators. We want them to find joy in writing. So often our kids are like, oh man, I have to write something, and they like slog through 2 sentences. We want them to be joyful about it and to be excited that they get to write their story about how they went hunting on the weekend, right? That kind of thing. And connect reading and writing. Our best writers are usually our best readers. Makes sense because they're seeing cool ways of working with language. They're getting, their vocab is expanding. Their genres, they maybe read something that's an autobiography and then they read fantasy stories. So they're starting to see all that. So Stephen King, I'm going to leave you with this quote. If you want to be a writer, you must do 2 things above others. Read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around those 2 things that I'm aware of. No shortcut. Okay, we're going to jump into sort of more specifics about teaching writing in the next one, but this was hopefully a bit of an overall, gives you some overall ideas of how to teach writing in your classroom.